Chapter of Character Building. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Recording by Luke Sartor. Character Building by Booker T. Washington. Chapter 21. What is to be our future? Last Thursday afternoon I received a telegram from a gentleman stopping for a time in a city in Georgia, asking me to come there at once on important business, and being rather curious to know what he wanted of me, I went. I found that this person was in the act of making his will, and that he had in mind the putting aside of a considerable sum in his will, some $20,000, in fact, for this institution. The special point upon which this gentleman wished to consult me was the future of the institution. He said that he had worked very hard for his money, that it had come as a result of much sacrifice and hard effort, and that there were friends of his who were beseeching him to use his money in other directions, because they thought it would be more likely to do permanent good elsewhere. And so he wished to know what the future of this institution is likely to be, because he did not care to risk his money upon an uncertain venture, one that was likely to prosper for a few years and then fail. He said that he would not like to give his money to an institution where it would not go on through the years, accomplishing a certain amount of good. Accordingly, the question he repeated to me over and over again was, "What is to be the future of Tuskegee?" He wished to know whether, if we were given the money, it would go on from year to year, blessing one generation after another. My point in speaking to you tonight is to emphasize what I think our good friend Professor Brown has already brought to our attention in one or two of his talks to us this week: the importance of making this institution what it ought to be, what its reputation gives it, and what its name implies. More and more I realize and I remember that the gentleman of whom I have spoken repeated this to me with great emphasis, that so far as the outside world is concerned, Tuskegee is sure. You need not have the least doubt that the institution will be supported. If we keep things right at the institution, if it is worthy of support, the moneyed people of the country will support it and stand by it. More and more each year this impression grows upon me, and more each year there are convincing evidences of the fact that the permanence and growth of this institution do not rest upon whether the people of the South or the people of the North are going to support it with their means. I have the most implicit confidence that the Institute is going to be supported. But the question that comes to us with the greatest force is, are we going to be worthy of that support? Shall we be worthy of the confidence of the public? That is the question that is most serious. That is the question that presses most heavily upon my heart and upon the hearts of the other teachers here. Now, these questions can be answered satisfactorily only by evidence that each student, each individual connected with the school in any way, no matter in how low or high a capacity, is putting his or her whole conscience into the work here. When I say work, I mean study of books, work of the hand, effort of the body, willingness of the heart. No matter what the thing is, put your conscience into it. Do your best. Let it be possible for you to say, "I have put my whole soul into my study, into my work, into whatever I have attempted. Whatever I have done, I have honestly endeavored to do to the best of my ability." The questions which this gentleman asked me, and similar kinds of questions, are being asked over and over again by people all over the country. The question can be answered only by our putting our consciences into our work, and by our being entirely unselfish in it. Let every person get into the habit of planning every day for the comfort and welfare of others. Let each one try to live as unselfishly as possible, remembering that the Bible says, "He that would save his life must lose it." And you never saw a person save his life in this higher sense, in the Christ-like sense, unless that person was willing, day by day, to lose himself in the interest of his fellow men. Such persons save their own lives, and in saving them, save thousands of other lives. Such questions as these can be satisfactorily answered not merely by our putting our consciences into every effort, no matter what the effort may be, but by improving day by day upon what has been done the day before. In large institutions and establishments, it is comparatively easy to find persons who will sweep a room day by day, or plough a field during certain seasons of the year, and do other work at certain other seasons of the year. But the difficulty comes in finding persons who make improvements in the manner of sweeping rooms, of ploughing fields, and planting corn. The question for us is, are we going to put so many brains into our efforts every year that we are going to go on steadily and constantly improving from year to year? Are you going to get into the habit of so thinking about your work here that the habit will become, as it were, a part of yourself, so that when you go out into the world, you will not be satisfied to take a position and go on in the same humdrum manner, but will not be satisfied until your work has been improved in every possible detail and made easier, more systematic, and more convenient? We must put brains into our work. There must be improvement in every department of this institution every year. It is absolutely impossible for an institution to stand still. It must go forward or backward, grow better or worse each year. An institution grows stronger and more useful each year, or weaker and less useful. This institution can grow only by each person putting his thought into his work, by planning how he can improve the work of his particular department, by constantly striving to make his work more useful to the institution, by keeping the place where he works cleaner, and making his work more businesslike and more systematic. That is the only way in which the questions which people all over the country are asking about this institution can be satisfactorily answered. You will find that people will look to us more and more for tangible results. Not only here, but all over the country, our race is going to be called on to answer the question, what can the race really accomplish? It is perfectly well understood by our friends, as well as by our enemies, that we can write good newspaper articles and make good addresses, that we can sing well and talk well, and all that kind of thing is perfectly well understood and conceded. But the question that will be more and more forced upon us for an answer is, can we work out our thoughts? Can we put them into tangible shape so that the world may see from day to day actual evidences of our intellectuality? Last winter I was in the town of Clinton, Iowa. I think I had never heard of the place before, and when I got there I was surprised to find it a place of more than 16,000 inhabitants. The gentleman who was to entertain me wanted to take me to a colored restaurant. I expected to go into a restaurant of the kind operated by our people generally, and I was very surprised when he took me into a large 2-story building. I found the floors carpeted, and everything about the place as pleasant and attractive as it was possible to make it. In fact, the restaurant compared very favourably with many in the largest cities in the country. I found the waiters clean, the service good, and everything conducted in the most systematic manner. And there was not the least thing, except the colour of the proprietor's skin, to show that the place was operated by coloured people. Afterward, my friend took me into another establishment of the same size, operated in the same creditable manner by another coloured man. In both I found that these gentlemen not only carried on a regular restaurant business, but manufactured their own candies and ice cream, and did a sort of wholesale catering business. I asked the white people there what they thought of the coloured people, and I did not find a single white person who did not have the most implicit confidence in the coloured people. The trouble was that there were not many coloured people there. That accounts possibly for the good opinion which the white people have of them. But you see what just two black men can do. These people had never seen many black people, but fortunately for us, they had with them two of the best specimens of our race that I have ever seen anywhere in this country. As a result, you do not find anyone cursing the black man in that town. Everybody had the utmost confidence in black people and respected them. Just in proportion as we can establish object lessons of this kind all over the country, you will find that the problem that now is so perplexing will disappear. Until we do this, we shall not be able to talk away or to argue away this prejudice. We cannot talk our way into our rights. We must work our way, think our way into them. And you will find that just in proportion as we do this, we are going to get all we deserve. End of chapter 21. What is to be our future? Recording by Luke Sartor, Griffith, New South Wales. Chapter of Character Building. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Recording by Luke Sartor. Character Building by Booker T. Washington. Chapter 22. Some Great Little Things. I am going to speak to you for a few minutes tonight upon what I shall term some great little things. I speak of them as great because of their supreme importance, and I speak of them as little because they come in a class of things which are usually looked upon by many people as small and unimportant. But in an institution like this, I think they often hold first place. Certainly, they come under the head of important things that we can learn. You will remember that in the sermon the chaplain preached this morning, he mentioned the threefold division of our nature: the physical part, the mental part, and the spiritual part. What I shall refer to tonight has largely to do with the material, the physical part of our natures. There are certain little things that each one of you can learn now in connection with the care of your bodies, which, if left unlearned now, will perhaps go without being learned all your lives. You are now, as it were, at the parting of the ways. You are going to make these habits a part of yourselves, or you are going to let them escape you forever, and be weak in a measure all your lives for not having made them a part of yourselves. I am going to speak very plainly, because I feel that such talk means nothing unless it is in language which everyone can appreciate and understand. Now, among the first things that a person going to a boarding school should learn, if he has not already learned it at home, and I am constantly being surprised at the number who seem to have thus left it unlearned, is the habit of regular and systematic bathing. No person who has left this habit unlearned can reach the highest success in life. I mean by that a person who does not get into the habit of keeping the body clean cannot do the highest work and the greatest amount of work in the world. When it comes to competing with persons who have learned the habit of keeping the body in good condition, you will find that the first named persons usually win in the race of life. I think many of you have already learned from your physiologies that when it comes to the combating of disease, where two persons are on a sick bed with the same disease, the one who is habitually clean in his personal habits has a far greater chance for recovery than the one who has not learned the habit of cleanliness. You will also find that the person who is in the habit of caring for his body is in a better condition of study. He is in a condition to bear prolonged and severe exertion, while the person whose body is unclean is in a weak condition. Take the matter of the teeth. Persons cannot call themselves educated and refined who do not make the matter of the cleanliness and proper care of their teeth an important part of themselves. When I speak of making such a thing a part of yourselves, I mean that you should make it such a strong habit that to leave it undone would seem unnatural. Some person has defined man as a bundle of habits. There are many habits that I wish you to make a part of yourselves by practicing so constantly that they may really be said to have become that. There is the matter of the care of the hair, which everyone should make a part of himself. There is also the proper care of the fingernails. Now all of these are common things, but they are great things. I should not recommend very highly a young man or young woman who went out from this institution as a graduate and had not learned the habit of caring for the teeth, hair, and nails systematically. Are you making these lessons a part of yourself? Take the young men and young women who have been here 2 or 3 years. Have you grown to the point where you are dissatisfied and all out of sorts when your hair is not combed, your fingernails dirty, and your body not in the condition it should be in? If you have not reached that point when you come to graduate, then there will be something wrong with your education, and you are not ready to go out from this institution, whether you are in the senior class or in the preparatory class. Another thing, I confess that I cannot have the highest kind of respect for the person who is in the habit of going day after day with buttons off his clothes. There is no excuse for it, when buttons are so cheap. I wonder how many of you could stand, if I were now to ask all to stand who have every button in its place. I cannot have the best opinion of a girl who will let a hole remain in her apron day after day. Nor can I think well of a man who does not remove a grease spot from his coat as soon as he discovers it. You have more respect for yourselves, and other people have more respect for you, when you get into the habit of polishing your shoes, no matter where you are, but especially when you are at school. Every man should get into the habit of polishing his shoes. See to it that they are in proper condition at all times. I need not repeat here, after what I have said, that it is of the utmost importance that every person wears the cleanest of linen. If I speak to you so plainly, it is because I want you to make these matters a part of yourselves to such an extent that they will be essential to your happiness and success. I want every girl who goes away from here to be so neatly perfect in her dress that she cannot be happy if there is any detail unattended to. And I want the same thing to be true of the young men. Let these things have an important bearing on your education here, and on your life hereafter. And then, above all things, although on account of the number of students here, you are very much crowded in your rooms, and will have to make all the harder effort on that account, get into the habit of being orderly and neat. School your roommates to the point where they will have a place for everything. Always know where to put your hands on anything you may want in your room, whether in the light or in the dark. Then there are 1 or 2 other little things. You should have quiet in your rooms, at your work, or in your talk with your fellow students. Do your work quietly. Get into the habit of closing doors quietly. You cannot realize how much all these little things add to your happiness and to the manhood and womanhood which you are going to build up as the years go on. And then, in conclusion, so order your lives that you can form the habit of reading. Set aside a certain amount of time each day, even if it be not more than 4 or 5 minutes, for reading and studying aside from your lessons. Read books of travel, history, and biography. I want you to patronize the library this year as never before. In it are great numbers of books by authors of the highest rank. Be regular in all your habits. Have a regular time for studying, for recreation, and for sleeping. And last, but far from least, set aside a regular time for thinking, for meditating with yourself. Take yourself up, pick yourself to pieces, see wherein you are weak and need strengthening. Analyze yourself. Get rid, as it were, of all the weights that have been holding you back, and resolve at the end of each week that you will walk upon your dead selves of the week before. If you will go on making that kind of progress, you will find at the end of the 9 school months that you are stronger in everything essential to good manhood and good womanhood. End of chapter 22. Some Great Little Things. Recording by Luke Sartor, Griffith, New South Wales. Chapter of Character Building. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Recording by Luke Sartor. Character Building by Booker T. Washington. Chapter 23. To Would-Be Teachers. Since very many of you whom I see before me tonight will spend some part of your lives after you leave here as teachers, even if you do not make teaching your life work, I am going to talk over with you again a subject on which I have spoken elsewhere: how to build up a good school in the South. The coloured schools of the South, especially in the country districts and smaller towns, are not kept open by the state fund, as a rule, longer than 3 or 4 months in the year. One of the great questions, then, willing teachers and parents, is how to extend the school term to 7 or 8 months, so that the school shall really do some good. I want to give a few plain suggestions which will, I think, if carefully followed, result in placing a good school in almost every community. In this I am not speculating, because more than one Tuskegee graduate has built up a good school on the plan I outline. In the first place, the teacher must be willing to settle down in the community and feel that that is to be his home, and teaching there his chief object in life while he is there. Not only must he not feel that he can move about from place to place every 3 months, but he must feel that he is not working for his salary alone. He must be willing to sacrifice for the good of the community. The next thing is to get a convenient schoolhouse. Usually in the far South, the state has not been able to build a schoolhouse. How is it to be secured? A good schoolhouse should be carefully planned. Then the teacher or someone else should go among the people in the community, coloured and white, and get each individual to give something, no matter how small an amount if in money, or if not in money, how little in value, for purchasing lumber. When we were getting started here at Tuskegee, one old coloured woman brought me 6 eggs as her contribution to our work. If enough money cannot be secured by subscription and collection to pay for the lumber, a supper, a festival, entertainment or church collection will help out. After the lumber is secured, the parents should be asked to club in with their wagons and haul it free. Then at least one good carpenter should be secured to take the lead in building. Each member of the community should agree to give a certain number of days' work in helping to put up the structure. In this work of building, the larger pupils can help a good deal, and they will have all the more interest in the schoolhouse because they have had a hand in its erection. In these ways, by patient effort, a good frame schoolhouse can be secured in almost any community. Where it is possible, take a 3 or 4 months public school as a starting point, and work in cooperation with the school officers, but do not let the school close at the end of these 3 or 4 months, because if that is done, it will amount to almost nothing. As soon as the teacher goes into a community, he should organize the people into an educational society or club, and there should be regular meetings once a week, or once in 2 weeks, at which plans for the improvement of the school should be discussed. There are a number of ways for extending the school term. One is for each parent to pay 10, 15, 25, or 50 cents each month during the whole time the school is in session. Frequently, parents who cannot pay in cash can let the teacher have eggs, chickens, butter, sweet potatoes, corn, or some other kind of produce which will help to supply the teacher with food. Another plan is for each farmer to set aside a portion of land and give all that is raised upon it to the school. Still another plan, and one that is being successfully carried out in at least one place, and one that I think much of, is for the teacher to secure, either by renting or purchase, a small tract of land, say from 2 to 5 acres, and let the children cultivate this land while they are attending school. If in this way 3 bales of cotton can be raised, and a variety of vegetables and grain also, the produce can be sold and the school term extended from 3 months to 6 or 7 months. Some parents may object to this at first, but they will soon see that it is better to let the school close at 1 o'clock or 2 o'clock in the afternoon, so that the children may work on the school land for an hour or 2, and in this way keep the school open 6 or 7 months, than to let it close entirely at the end of 3 months. There is another advantage in this latter plan. The teacher can in this way teach the students, in a practical way, better methods of farming. Short talks on the principles of agriculture are worth much more to them than time spent in committing to memory the names of mountain peaks in Central Africa. Very often there is enough land right around the schoolhouse for the pupils to cultivate. In every case where it is possible, the teacher should buy a home in the community and make his home in every way a model for those of the people who live around him. The teacher should cultivate a farm, or follow some trade while not teaching. This not only helps him, but sets a good example for the people in the community. If the teacher be a woman, there are a few communities where she cannot add much to her income by sewing, dressmaking, or poultry raising. End of chapter 23. To would-be teachers. Recording by Luke Sartor, Griffith, New South Wales. Chapter of Character Building. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Recording by Luke Sartor. Character Building by Booker T. Washington. Chapter 24. The Cultivation of Stable Habits. I am going to speak with you a few minutes this evening upon the matter of stability. I want you to understand when you start out in school that no individual can accomplish anything unless he means to stick to what he undertakes. No matter how many possessions he may have, no matter how much he may have in this or that direction, no matter how much learning or skill of hand he may possess, an individual cannot succeed unless, at the same time, he possesses that quality which will enable him to stick to what he undertakes. In a word, he is not to be jumping from this thing to that thing. That is the reason why so many ministers fail. They preach a while, and then jump to something else. They do not stick to one thing. It is the same with many lawyers and doctors. They do not stick to what they undertake. Many businessmen fail for the same reason. When an individual gets a reputation, no matter what he has undertaken, of not having the quality of sticking to a thing until he succeeds in reaching the end, that reputation nullifies the influence for good of the better traits of his character in every direction. It is said of him that he is unstable. I want you to begin your school life with the idea that you are going to stick to whatever you undertake until you have completed it. I take it for granted that all of you have come here with that idea in mind, that before you came here you sat down and talked the matter over with your father and mother, read over the circulars giving information about the school, and then deliberately decided that this institution was the one whose course of study you wished to complete. I take it for granted that you have come here with that end in view. And I want to say to you now that you will injure yourselves, your parents, and the institution, and you will hurt your own reputation unless, after having come here with the determination to succeed, you remain here for that purpose, and remain for the full time until you receive your diploma. I hope every individual here, every young man and woman at the school, is here with the determination that he or she will not give up the struggle until the object aimed at has been attained. You are at a stage now when, if you begin jumping about here and there, if you begin in this course of study and then go to that course of study, you will very likely be jumping about from one thing to another all your life. You must make up your minds, after coming here, to do well whatever you undertake. This is a good rule not only to begin your school life with, but also to begin your later life with. Perhaps I was never more interested than I was last evening in Montgomery, while standing on one of the streets there for an hour. I seldom stand on any street for an hour, but last night I did stand on that street for an hour, in front of a large, beautiful store that is owned by Mr. J. W. Adams, and watched the notice taken of the display of millinery made in his store windows by two girls that finished their academic and industrial courses at this school, Miss Jemmy Pierce and Miss Lydia Robinson. The first Monday in October is always the day in Montgomery for what they call the millinery openings. On that day the stores which handle such goods all make a great display of ladies' hats and bonnets. It was surprising and interesting to note how these two girls had entered a great city like Montgomery and had taken entire charge of the millinery department in a large store. Hundreds of people stopped to comment favourably upon the taste that was displayed in the decoration of those windows. Now all of this work was done by two Tuskegee graduates, and the complimentary remarks that were made came not only from coloured people, but from white people as well. No one could tell from the windows of that store whether it was a coloured or a white establishment. Many of the white ladies who were standing there did not know that they were standing in front of a store that was owned by a black man. It had none of the usual earmarks about it. Usually when you go into coloured establishments, you see grease on the doors or on the counters, or you see this sign or that sign that this is a coloured man's establishment. Those of you here who are going to go into business after you leave school do not want to have any such earmarks about your establishments. Such a store as that of Mr. Adams is the kind of a store to have. Now these two young women have made a reputation for themselves. They went into the millinery division while they were here, and they remained until they graduated. One of them, I believe, had not finished in the millinery department when she received her academic diploma, and so she came back last year and took a postgraduate course in millinery. It is interesting and encouraging to see these two young women succeeding in their work, and it all comes from their determination to succeed, and because they had sense enough to finish what they had undertaken. That is the lesson that you all want to learn. If you do not learn it now, in a large degree you will be failures in life. You want to be like these young women. You want to fight it out. Now if you mean to get your diploma, you are going to have a hard time. Some of you are going to be without shoes, without a hat, without proper clothing of any kind. You will get discouraged because you have not as nice a dress or as nice a hat as this person or that person. I would not give a snap of my finger for a person who would give up for that. The thing for you to do is to fight it out. Get something in your head, and don't worry about what you can get to put on it. The clothes will come afterward. You are going to be greatly discouraged sometimes. But if you will heed the lesson of fighting out what you have undertaken, that same disposition will follow you all through life, and you will get a reputation, because people will say of you that there is a person who sticks to whatever he or she undertakes. One of the saddest things in life is to see an individual who has grown to old age, with no profession, with no calling whatever, from which he is sure of getting an independent living. It is sad to see such individuals without money, without homes, in their old age, simply because they did not learn the lesson of saving money and getting for themselves a beautiful home when they ought to have done this. And so, all through life, we can point to many people who have not learned this lesson, that for whatever they undertake, they must pay the price which the world asks of them if they would succeed. If we are going to succeed, we must pay the price for what we get. And he who accomplishes the most, accomplishes it in a humble and straightforward way, by sticking to what he has undertaken. He who does this finds in the end that he has achieved a tremendous success. End of chapter 24. The Cultivation of Stable Habits. Recording by Luke Sartor, Griffith, New South Wales. Of Character Building. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Recording by Luke Sartor. Character Building by Booker T. Washington. Chapter 25. What You Ought to Do. It is comparatively easy to perform almost any kind of work, but the value of any work is in having performed so that the desired results may be most speedily reached, and in having the means with which the worked labours arranged so as to meet certain ends. It is the constant problems of those organs which have charge of the well-being of the body to cause digestion to take place, so that what is nourishing in the food may reach every part of the body, not only the portions near the organs in which digestion takes place, but also the most extreme parts of the different members. Just so it is the aim of all persons who are accustomed to making public addresses to try to make those who are far away from them hear them as well as those who sit near. In this same way, it seems to me more and more every year It is going to be the main object of all our schools in the South to make their influence felt most forcibly among those who are remote from them. How can we reach the masses who are remote? I mean remote from educational advantages and from opportunities for encouragement and enlightenment. The problem in the rural districts is different because of the vastness of the number to be reached and of the frequent difficulty of reaching them. We must keep this fact before us, then, that institutions of this kind are of little value unless they can pave the way to make the results of their work felt among the masses of the people, who are especially remote from these institutions. It is a fact, as most of you know, that we very seldom meet with a thoroughly well-educated teacher in the rural districts, in despite of the passing of over 30 years since we became men and women. You know, too, that the same thing is, in too large a measure, true of the ministry. The responsibility for reaching these people, for affecting them for good, rests upon the young men and young women who are being educated in these Southern institutions today. What are you going to do as your part towards reaching these people, towards carrying to them the light which they need so much and so earnestly long for? Difficult as this problem is, it is not a discouraging one, because these people are ready to follow the light as soon as they are sure that the right kind of light is set up before them. You very seldom meet with a coloured man who is not conscious of his ignorance, and who is not anxious to get up as soon as he finds himself down. In this respect, the problem is encouraging. One of the ways in which the problem is serious is with respect to labour. In almost every city and town in the South, a large proportion of the coloured people are shiftless so far as manual labour is concerned, although I think there is already improvement. The masses of our people are given to thrift and industry, and to unremitting toil in their way. The hard thing about it, the discouraging thing, is that they do not know how to realize the results of their toil, because they have no education and little idea of industrial development. They do not know how to make their work tell for what it ought to. As a general thing, the people, those in the country especially, do not ask anybody to come and give them food, clothing, and houses. All they ask is for some person, some honest, upright man or woman, who is interested in their welfare, to come among them and show them how to direct their efforts and their energy, show them how best to realize the results of their work, so that they can supply their own moral, religious, and material needs, and educate their children. And you will find that wherever this institution, Hampton, Talladega, Fisk, Atlanta, or any other, can put in the midst of the people young men and young women who will settle down among them and make their lives object lessons for the people, plant a good school, and convince the people that the teacher has settled down there to stay through encouraging or discouraging circumstances, you will find that such a teacher will not only be encouraged, but will be supported materially. In every way, there will be an opportunity for that person to revolutionize the community. That opportunity is open to you. It is an opportunity which is being opened to no other set of young men and young women who are being educated anywhere else in the world. Are you going to appreciate the beauty and grandeur of this opportunity? I was talking with a gentleman last night who has recently spent some time in one of the southern states, and he told me that in hardly any country district in that state was there a public school which is kept open longer than 4 months. He tells me that the average salary in some of those districts is little more than $15 a month. In another state the conditions of the people is about the same. In our own state, perhaps, the conditions are worse even than in the states referred to. In some counties in Alabama, the people are this year receiving no money to run their schools more than 3.5 months in the year, except of course in the cities and towns. In some counties the teachers are being paid only $12 to $20, and there are possibly some where the teachers get no more than $10 from the state fund. I was talking with a gentleman from another state not long ago about the material condition of the people in that state, and he told me that so far as their industrial life is concerned, the masses are in a very bad condition this year, that they are too often at the mercy of the landowners. I refer to the people who run the large plantations, and that the same thing is largely true of all of the cotton-raising states. I need not go on to describe to you the moral results that must inevitably follow such a condition of things. I need not take your time to tell you that there can be little morality or religion among people who are so ignorant as these people, and who do not know where they are going to get anything to eat. It is needless to describe the train of moral evils that must follow such conditions as these. What I have attempted to describe to you as existing today in these country districts may not be very encouraging, but it seems to me that every young man and young woman who has enjoyed the privileges afforded by this and by other institutions in the South — I speak especially now to the members of the next graduating class — should feel that such conditions as these present one of the most inviting fields possible for labour. Every young man and woman here is being educated by money that is given by others. None of you are paying for the education you are receiving. You might pay for your board, but you would have to do that elsewhere. Everyone must pay for his or her own clothing, but the cost of buildings, rent, tuition, expenses, and other matters pertaining to the institution you do not pay. Your education, in a large measure, is a gift from the public, and it seems to me that one of the first things you should do is to repay, to as large an extent as is possible, with your services, what has been spent in giving you so large a part of your education. This is a debt that you owe not only to yourselves, but to our race and our country. It is a religious debt as well, that you will be willing to go out into these country districts and suffer, as it were, for a few years, until you can get a foothold, so that you can plant yourselves in one of these dark communities. I feel sure that you would not have to suffer very long. I believe that the hardest part of the struggle would come during the first 2 or 3 years. When you can convince the people that you are in earnest, the battle is won. When you can convince them that it is cheaper to keep an educated teacher than to keep one who is ignorant, and when you can once demonstrate your value to them, not only in an educational respect, but industrially and morally, the battle is won, and these people will stand by you and support you. In many cases, it is my belief that you will eventually find yourselves better supported financially than you would if you had gone to work in cities and large towns. No matter from which side you look at this problem, good is bound to come from it. And while we are talking about the reward that will come as a result of your services, let me tell you that no greater satisfaction can come to anyone than that which you will get from the worship and praise which will come to you from these old mothers and fathers who will be benefited by your services. I know of instances where teachers have gone and planted themselves in these country districts who, even if they do not make such a very great success financially, receive the love and most sincere worship from year to year, because of the feeling of gratitude which the people among whom they have settled have for them on account of their having helped them in so many ways. This same kind of pioneer work had to be done all over the world before the right kind of civilization was planted. It was such work as this that the people did who settled the Great West, where they were deprived of the comforts of life. The people who planted Oberlin College in what was then a wilderness had to suffer many such hardships. The men who went to Washington, Oregon, and California and established what now large cities there are had to suffer many such hardships. They had to suffer just what you must and should suffer. Are you going to suffer for your own people until they can receive the light which they so much need. If the young men and women before me have the right kind of stuff in them, they will do this. Most certainly do I hope that you are going to carry out into these dark communities the light which you receive here from day to day. I hope you will fill these districts with men and women of education. When you go out from here with your diploma, whether it be next Mayor at some other time, resolve to plant yourself in one community and stay there. No matter what your work is, you cannot accomplish much if you become the wandering Jew. Find the community where you think you can use your life to the best advantage, and then stay there. In the time that has elapsed since this talk was given, I think there has been improvement in many of the country schools in the South, and in the general condition of the people, as described to me then. Booker T. Washington. End of Chapter 25. What You Ought to Do. Recording by Luke Sartor, Griffith, New South Wales. Of character building. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Recording by Luke Sartor. Character Building by Booker T. Washington. Chapter 26. Individual Responsibility. I have referred in a general way before this, when I have been speaking to you, to the fact that each one of you ought to feel an interest in whatever task is set for you to do here, over and above the mere bearing which that task has on your own life. I wish to speak more specifically tonight on this subject, on what I may term the importance of your feeling a sense of personal responsibility, not only for the successful performance of every task set you, but for the successful outcome of every worthy undertaking with which you come in contact. You ought to realize that your actions will not affect yourselves alone. In this age it is almost impossible for a man to live for himself alone. On every side our lives touch those of others. Their lives touch ours. Even if it were possible to live otherwise, few would wish to. A narrow life, a selfish life, is almost sure to be not only unprofitable, but unhappy. The happy people and the successful people are those who go out of their way to reach and influence for good as many persons as they can. In order to do this, though, in order best to fit one's self to live this kind of life, it is important that certain habits be acquired, and an essential one of these is the habit of realizing one's responsibility to others. Your actions will affect other people in one way or another, and you will be responsible for the result. You ought always to remember this, and govern yourselves accordingly. Suppose it is the matter of the recitation of a lesson, for instance. Some one may say, "It is nobody's business but my own if I fail in a recitation. Nobody will suffer but me." This is not so. Indirectly you injure your teacher also, for while a conscientious, hard-working teacher ought not to be blamed for the failures of pupils who do not learn simply because they do not want to, or are too lazy to try, it is generally the case that a teacher's reputation gains or loses as his or her class averages high or low, and each failure in recitation, for whatever cause, brings down the average. Then, too, you are having an influence upon your classmates, even if it be unconscious. There is hardly ever a student who is not observed by someone at some time as an example. "There is such a boy," some other student says to himself. "He has failed in class ever so many times, and still he gets along. It can't make much difference if I fail once." And as a result he neglects his duty, and does fail. The same thing is true of work in the industrial departments. Too many students try to see how easily they can get through the day or the work period, and yet not get into trouble. Or even if they take more interest than this, they care for their work only for the sake of what they can get out of it for themselves, either as pay or as instruction, which will enable them to work for pay at some later time. Now there ought to be a higher impulse behind your efforts than that. Each student ought to feel that he or she has a personal responsibility to do each task in the very best manner possible. You owe this not only to your fellow students, your teachers, the school, and the people who support the institution, but you owe it even more to yourselves. You owe it to yourselves because it is right and honest, because nothing less than this is right and honest, and because you never can be really successful and really happy until you do study and work and live in this way. I have been led to speak specifically on this subject tonight on account of two occurrences here which have come to my notice. One of these illustrates the failure on the part of students to feel this sense of responsibility to which I have referred. The other affords an illustration of the possession by a student of a feeling of personal interest and personal responsibility, which has been very gratifying and encouraging. The first incident, I may say, occurred some months ago. It is possible that the students who were concerned in it may not be here now, or, if they are, that it would not happen again. I certainly hope not. A gentleman who had been visiting here was to go away. He left word at the office of his wish, saying that he planned to leave town on the 5 o'clock train in the afternoon. A boy was sent from the office early in the afternoon with a note to the barn, ordering a carriage to take this gentleman and his luggage to the station. 4:30 came, and the man had his luggage brought down to the door of the building in which he had been staying, so as to be ready when the team came. But no team came. The visitor finally became so anxious that he walked over to the barn himself. Just as he reached the barn, he met the man who was in charge there, with the note in his hand. The note had only just that moment reached this man, and of course no carriage had been sent, because the first person who felt that he had any responsibility in the matter had only just learned that a carriage was wanted. The boy who had brought the note had given it to another boy, and he to someone else, and he, perhaps, to someone else. At any rate, it had been delayed because no one had taken enough interest in the errand to see that whatever business the note referred to received proper attention. This occurred, as I have said, several months ago, before the local train here went over to Chehaw to meet all of the trains. It happened that this particular passenger was going north, and it was possible by driving to Chehaw for him to get there in time to take the northbound train. If he had been going the other way, though, towards Montgomery, he would have lost the train entirely, and, as chanced to be the case, would have been unable to keep a very important engagement. As it was, he was obliged to ride to Chehaw in a carriage, and the time of a man and a team, which otherwise would have been saved, was required to take him there. Now when such a thing as this happens, no amount of saying, "I am sorry," by the person or persons to blame will help the matter any. It is too late to help it then. The thing to do is to feel some responsibility in seeing that things are done right yourself. Take enough interest in whatever you are engaged in to see that it is going to come out in the end just as nearly right, just as nearly perfect as anything you can will go towards making it right or perfect. And if the task or errand passes out of your hands before it is completed, do not feel that your responsibility in the matter ends until you have impressed it upon the mind and heart of the person to whom you turn over the further performance of the duty. The world is looking for men and women who can tell one why they can do this thing or that thing, how a certain difficulty was surmounted or a certain obstacle removed. But the world has little patience with the man or woman who takes no real interest in the performance of a duty, or who runs against a snag and gets discouraged, and then simply tells why he did not do a thing, and gives excuses instead of results. Opportunities never come a second time, nor do they wait for our leisure. The years come to us but once, and they come then only to pass swiftly on, bearing the ineffaceable record we have put upon them. If we wish to make them beautiful years or profitable years, we must do it moment by moment as they glide before us. The other case to which I have referred is pleasanter to speak about. One day this spring, after it had got late enough in the season, so that it was not as a general thing necessary to have fires to heat our buildings, a student passing Phelps Hall noticed that there was a volume of black smoke pouring out of one of the chimneys there. Some boys might not have noticed the smoke at all. Others would have said that it came from the chimney. Still others would have said that it was none of their business anyway, and would have gone along. This boy was different. He noticed the smoke, although he saw that it came from the chimney, and if so, it was probably no sign of harm. He felt that any smoke at all there at that time was such an unusual thing that it ought to be investigated, for fear it might mean danger to the building. He was not satisfied until he had gone into the building and had inspected every floor clear up to the attic, to see that the chimney and the building were not in danger. As it happened, the janitor had built a fire in the furnace in the basement for some reason, so that the young man's anxiety, fortunately, was unfounded. But I am heartily glad he had such an anxiety, and that he could not rest until he found out whether there was any foundation for it or not. I shall feel that all of our buildings are safer for his being here, and when he graduates and goes away, I hope he will leave many others here who will have the same sense of personal responsibility which he had. Let me tell you, here and now, that unless you young men and young women come to have this characteristic, your lives are going to fall far short of the best and noblest achievement possible. We frequently hear the word lucky used with reference to a man's life. Two boys start out in the world at the same time, having the same amount of education. When 20 years have passed, we find one of them wealthy and independent. We find him a successful professional man with an assured reputation, or perhaps at the head of a large commercial establishment employing many men, or perhaps a farmer owning and cultivating hundreds of acres of land. We find the second boy, grown now to be a man, working for perhaps $1 or $1.50 a day, and living from hand to mouth in a rented house. When we remember that the boys started out in life equal-handed, we may be tempted to remark that the first boy has been fortunate, that fortune has smiled on him, and that the second has been unfortunate. There is no such nonsense as that. When the first boy saw a thing that he knew he ought to do, he did it, and he kept rising from one position to another until he became independent. The second boy was an eye servant who was afraid that he would do more than he was paid to do. He was afraid that he would give 50 cents worth of labor for 25 cents. He watched the clock for fear that he would work 1 minute past 12 o'clock at noon and past 6 o'clock at night. He did not feel that he had any responsibility to look out for his employer's interests. The first boy did $1 worth of work for 50 cents. He was always ready to be at the store before time, and then, when the bell rang to stop work, he would go to his employer and ask him if there was not something more that ought to be done that night before he went home. It was this quality in the first boy that made him valuable and caused him to rise. Why should we call him fortunate or lucky? I think it would be much more suitable to say of him, he is responsible. End of chapter 26. Individual Responsibility. Recording by Luke Sartor, Griffith, New South Wales. Of character building. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Recording by Luke Sartor. Character Building by Booker T. Washington. Chapter 27. Getting On in the World. It is natural and praiseworthy for a person to be looking for a higher and better position than the one he occupies. So long as a man does his whole duty in what he is engaged in, he is not to be condemned for looking for something better to do. Now the question arises, how are you going to put yourself in a condition to be in demand for these higher and more important positions? In the first place, you should be continually on the lookout for opportunities to improve yourselves in your present work. You should be constantly on the lookout for chances to make yourselves more valuable to your present employer and more efficient in your work for him. Suppose you are engaged in the work of milking cows. I think it better to talk of practical things with which you all are acquainted, although I know that many of you boys had rather I would tell you how to go to Congress than how to become successful milkers. Inasmuch, though, as I suspect a good many more of us will have to milk cows than go to Congress, I think it will not hurt us to talk about milking. If the boy who milks cows now does that thoroughly, by doing it he may lay the foundation to go to Congress later. The point is that we want to be constantly on the lookout for ways of improving whatever work we are engaged in, whether that work be milking cows or doing something else. In whatever you are doing, there are a great many improvements which you want to become acquainted with. If your work is dairying, read the dairy journals. Get hold of every book or paper that you can which has anything to do with your line of work. Be sure that you know all, or as nearly as possible, all there is to know about milking cows. And then don't be content with what you get out of books and newspapers, for that information is only the result of some other person's experience. By conversing with intelligent and experienced persons, and by your own experiments, you can get much valuable information about your work. Never get to the point where you are ashamed to ask somebody else for information. The ignorant man will always be ignorant if he fears that by asking for information he will betray his lack of knowledge. Know all there is to be known about the position you occupy, but ever feel that there is more for you to learn. There is no person who makes himself of so little use in the world as the one who feels that he knows all there is to be known about his work. If you are milking cows, and feel that you know all there is to be known about that subject, you have simply reached a point where you are practically useless and unfitted for the work. Feel that you can always learn something from somebody else. It is a mark of intelligence to learn, even from the humblest person. I do not mean for you always to put into practice every suggestion that is made to you, or to agree with every statement made to you. But listen to what people say, weigh their plans alongside of your own, and then profit by the one which you are convinced is the best. Persevere in such conversation, and in reading. You will constantly be surprised to find how little you really know about your work, and how much more somebody else knows about it than you do. You want to get to the point where you can anticipate the wants of your employer. In this way, you will make yourself of great service to him. You do not know how vexing and discouraging it is to a man to be compelled to say every morning to those in his employ, "Do this at 9 o'clock, and that at 12 o'clock, and the other at 5. or how pleasant it is to have a person with whom you come in contact anticipate the needs of the man who employs him. Then you can make yourself valuable and in demand just in proportion as you consider that the work you are performing is your own. Do not consider that it is being performed for a certain man or a particular organization. Make haste and get to the point where you can feel that everything connected with the shop in which you work, or in the office, or in the stable, is under your care, and that you alone are responsible for it. If you are at the head of a stable or barn, plan day by day how you can best provide for the well-being of your cows and horses. When you make yourself master of these humble positions, you will find that the calls to higher places will come to you. The men you see spending most of their times looking for higher and more lucrative positions are, 9 times out of 10, men who have made worthless failures in other places. End of chapter 27. Getting on in the world. Recording by Luke Sartor, Griffith, New South Wales. Chapter of Character Building. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Recording by Luke Sartor. Character Building by Booker T. Washington. Chapter 28. Each one his part. I desire to call your attention for a few minutes tonight to the fact that one thing is dependent for success upon another. One individual is dependent for success upon another. One family in a community upon other families for their mutual prosperity. One part of a state upon the other parts for the successful government of the state. The same thing is true in nature. One thing cannot exist unless another exists, cannot succeed without the success of something else. The very forces of nature are dependent upon other forces for their existence. Without vegetable life, we could not have animal life. Without mineral life, we could not have vegetable life. So, throughout all kinds of life, as throughout the life of nature, everything is dependent upon something else for its success. The same thing is true of this institution and of every institution. The success of the whole depends upon having every person connected with the institution do his or her whole duty. We are very apt to get the idea that there are high positions and that there are low positions, that there is important service and unimportant service. But I believe that God expects the same amount of conscientious work from a person in a low position as from one in a high position, that He expects the same conscientious service, whether the work be a big task or a little one. We are dependent as an institution, every institution is dependent, for success upon the individual consciences of those connected with it as teachers and students. And there is nothing that gives me more satisfaction and pleasure, and more faith in the future of the school, than to see examples of conscientious work here. I remember a special instance of this kind that occurred at one of our commencements. I believe that commencement, more than any other time in the school year, is an occasion where there is excitement and a desire to witness the exercises. After the exercises of that year were over, I had occasion to go to the dining room, and I found there one of the teachers who from her appearance I thought had not attended the exercises. When I asked her about this, she said, "No, I intended to go, but at the last minute I saw that there were some dishes here that needed to be washed, and I stayed here to see that they were washed." Now that was one of the finest exhibitions of conscientious regard for duty that I ever saw. And there are very few persons who would have done a thing like that. That we have teachers here whose hearts are so much in their work that they are willing to do such things as this, gives me great faith in the future of this school as the years go on. It takes a person with a conscience, when there are public men of note here, a great many strangers and many things to attract attention, to be so mindful of her duty that she will stay behind and wash dishes when everyone else is in attendance upon the exercises and seeking enjoyment. When the people connected with this institution can bring themselves up to that point, I have no fear for the success of the institution, and it can succeed only as they do bring their consciences up to that point. If I were to ask you individually as students to deliver an address upon this platform, or to read an essay, I should not be at all afraid that you would fail. I believe that you would carefully prepare that address or essay. You would look up all the references necessary in order to give you what information you needed, and then you would get up here and speak or read successfully. I feel sure that I would hear something that I should not be ashamed of. The average man and woman do succeed when before the public, but where I fear for your success is when you come to the performance of the small duties, the duties which you think no one else will know about, the things which no one will see you do. It is when you think that no one is going to see you washing dishes or getting dirt out of crevices that I am afraid you are going to fail. I remember that some time ago, when I was travelling in a buggy from one New England village to another, after we had gone some miles on our way, the young man who was driving me stopped the horse and got out. I asked him what was the matter, and he said that something was the matter with the harness. I looked with all the eyes I had, and yet I could see nothing at fault. Still, the man mended a piece of harness that he said was not as it should be. It had not seemed to me that this fault in the harness had been irritating the horse or hindering him from going so fast as he ought. But after it had been repaired, I could see a difference for the better. That, to my mind, was a great lesson. It taught me how the people of New England have educated their consciences, so that they cannot allow themselves to let even the smallest thing go undone, or be improperly done. It is this trait in the New England character that has come to make the very name itself of that part of the country a synonym for success. Don't we wish that we had 100 such men as that driver here? If I could put my hand on 1,000 such persons as that, we could find employment for all of them as soon as they got their diplomas. One learns to judge persons by their character in this respect. Not long ago I had an opportunity to go through the jail of this county. As the sheriff showed me through the building, I was impressed to see how clean everything was, and I noticed that the man who seemed to be the janitor of the jail, although he too was a prisoner, seemed to take a great deal of pride in showing me the cleanness of the corners and the general good appearance of the place. He seemed to put his whole heart into the keeping of that jail clean. "Who is that man?" I asked the sheriff, after we had got out of the janitor's hearing. "He is a prisoner," the sheriff replied, "but I believe he is innocent. I do not believe that a man can be so honest and faithful about his work and be guilty of a crime. When I see how well he does his work here, notwithstanding the fact that he is shut up here in prison, I believe that he is an honest man and deserves his freedom." In plain words, then, the problem we must work out here is not, can you master algebra or literature? We know you can do that. We know you can master the sciences. The general problem we have to work out here, and work it out with fear and trembling, is, can we educate the individual conscience? Can we so educate a group of students that there will be in every one of them a conscience on which we can depend? Can we educate a class of girls here who will not be satisfied when sweeping their rooms to make the middle of the rooms look clean, but leave a trail of dirt in the corners and under the furniture? Will they see to it that everything is properly cleaned and put in its appropriate place? Can we educate a class of young men who will do their duty on the farm as they would do it on this platform? Can we educate your consciences so that you will do certain things, not because it is the rule that they should be done, but because they should be done? These are the problems we must work out here. End of chapter 28. Each one his part. Recording by Luke Sartor, Griffith, New South Wales. Of character building. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Recording by Luke Sartor. Character Building by Booker T. Washington. Chapter 29. What would father and mother say? I think there is no more important or more critical time in a person's life than when he or she leaves home for the first time, to enter school, or to go to work, or to go into business. I think that as a general thing, you can judge pretty accurately what a person is going to amount to in life by the way he or she acts during the first year or two after leaving home. You will find usually, that if a young man is able during this time to stand up against temptation, is able to practice the lessons that his father and mother have taught him, and instead of falling by the wayside, gains help and inspiration as he goes along from these lessons, he is almost sure to prove himself a valuable citizen, one who not only will be a help to his parents in their old age, but a help to the community in which he lives. There is no better way to test an act than to ask yourself the question, what would my father or my mother think of this? Would they approve? Or should I be ashamed to let them know that I have done this thing? If you will ask yourselves these questions day by day, I think you will find that you will get a great deal of assistance from them in the shaping of your lives while you are here at school. I want you to put that question to yourselves with regard to deportment, because that is a thing on which we must lay emphasis. We can fill your heads with knowledge, and we can train your hands to work with skill. But unless all this training of head and hand is based upon high, upright character, upon a true heart, it will amount to nothing. You will be no better off than the most ignorant. Now, one of the ways in which young people are likely to go astray, especially when they first go away from home to school, is in yielding to a temptation to spend their time with persons who have mean and low dispositions, persons whom you would be ashamed to have your parents know that you kept company with. Avoid that. Be sure that the young men and women with whom you associate are persons who are able to raise you up, persons who will help to make you stronger in every way. I do not need to tell you, I am sure, of the consequences of association with persons who will have a bad influence upon you, or the results of a disregard of admonitions for good. A student who persistently keeps bad company, who breaks rules, who is constantly disobedient, who is repeatedly behind at roll call, who, time after time, has to be called up by the officer of the day, or watched in the dining room, or on the parade ground, is the student who in a few years is going to bring sorrow to the hearts of his parents. There is no getting away from that. Only today the mother of one of the students came here with a message from another mother, whose son had been sent here. She told me how this anxious mother had told her to impress upon her son the necessity of obeying every rule here, and how she wanted him to put in every moment in hard study and honest work. She wanted this woman to impress upon the man how hard his mother was struggling every day so that she could keep him here, and at the same time provide for the younger children of the family at home. Now, when this message was delivered, where was that boy? Was he doing as his mother was so earnestly praying him to do? No. He had already disgraced himself and had been sent away from the institution. How much sorrow will he bring to his poor mother's heart when she knows? No wonder he was trying to conceal his misconduct and disgrace from her. Let me entreat you then, if you are inclined to fritter away the best hours of your lives, think how the news of your misconduct will act upon the hearts of your parents, those fathers and mothers whose every thought is of you. I have spoken of these as some of the things that we do not want to have you do at school. What are some of the things that we do want you to learn to do? We want to have you learn to see and appreciate the practical value of the religion of Christ. We hope to help you to see that religion, that Christianity is not something that is far off, something in the air, that it is not something to be enjoyed only after the breath has left the body. We want to have you see that the religion of Christ is a real and helpful thing, that it is something which you can take with you into your classrooms, into your shops, onto the farm, into your very sleeping rooms, and that you do not have to wait until tomorrow before you can find out about the power and helpfulness of Christ's religion. We want to have you feel that this religion is a part of your lives, and that it is meant to be a help to you from day to day. We hope to have you feel that the religious services that we have you attend here are not burdens, but that it is a privilege, greatly to be desired, to come to these meetings and into the prayer meetings of the various societies on the grounds, and there commune, not in a far-off imaginary way, but in a humble and intimate way, with the Spirit of Jesus. We want you to feel that religion is something to make you happier, brighter, and more hopeful, not something to make you go about with long, solemn faces. We want you to learn, if you do not already know, that in order to be Christ-like, one does not have to be unnatural. Then, we want to have you learn to govern your actions, not alone for the sake of the result which they will have upon yourself and those who are near and dear to you, but for the sake of your influence upon all with whom you will come in contact. Your life here will be largely wasted. I am tempted to say wholly wasted, if you failed to learn that higher, broader, and far more important lesson of your relations to your fellow students and to all the persons by whom you are going to be daily surrounded. Your life will be wasted if you go away from here and have not learned that the greatest lesson of all is the lesson of brotherly love, of usefulness, and of charity. I want to see young men who are here realizing this spirit to such an extent that they will rise in chapel and give their seats to students who are strangers at the school. I want to have you get to the point where you will go to the matron in the dining room and ask her permission to have some new student who has not had a chance to get acquainted take his meals at a seat beside you. Of the many noble traits exhibited by the late General Armstrong, none made a deeper impression upon me than his supreme unselfishness. I do not believe that I ever saw in all my association with General Armstrong anything in his life or actions which indicated in the slightest degree that he was selfish. He was interested not only in the black South, but in the white South, not only in his own school, but in all schools. Anything which he could do or say to benefit another institution seemed to give him as much pleasure as if he was speaking or acting directly for the benefit of Hampton Institute. I had a pleasant experience of this spirit of a desire to be helpful to others a little while ago, when I was visiting a certain theological seminary in Pennsylvania. I think I was never in such an atmosphere as during the 2 days I spent in that institution. I was surrounded by a crowd of young men whose sole object seemed to be to make me comfortable and happy. Most of these young men were far advanced in the study of theology and the sciences, and yet they were not above serving me, even to the extent of offering to black my boots. When I came away, several wished to carry my luggage to the station. This is the kind of thoughtfulness we want to have in every corner of this institution. Get hold of the spirit of wanting to help somebody else. Seek every opportunity possible to make somebody happy and comfortable. Do all this, and you will find that the years will not be many before we will have one of the best institutions on the face of the globe, and that you, in helping to make it such, have been doing these things that, when you ask yourselves, "What would father and mother say about my doing this?" will enable you to answer the question with pride and satisfaction. End of chapter 29. What would father and mother say? Recording by Luke Sartor, Griffith, New South Wales. Chapter of Character Building. This is the LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Recording by Luke Sartor. Character Building by Booker T. Washington. Chapter 30. Object Lessons. Not long ago, an old colored man living in this state said to me, "I's done quit livin' in the ashes. I's got my second freedom." That remark meant, in this case, that old man, by economy, hard work, and proper guidance, after 20 years of struggle, had freed himself from debt, had paid for 50 acres of land, had built a comfortable house, and was a taxpayer. It meant that his 2 sons had been educated in academic and agricultural branches, that his daughter had received mental training in connection with lessons in sewing and cooking. Within certain limitations, here was a Christian American home, the result of industrial effort and philanthropy. This Negro had been given a chance to get upon his feet. That is all that any Negro in America asks. That is all that you in this school ask. What position in state, in letters, or in commerce and in business the offspring of that man is to occupy must be left to the future and the capacity of the race. What position you are to occupy must be left to your future and to your capacity. During the days of slavery, we were shielded from competition. Today, unless we prepare ourselves to compete with the world, we must go to the wall as a race. If I were to go into certain communities in the United States and say that the German is ignorant, I should be pointed to the best paying truck farm in that neighborhood, owned and operated by a German. If I said that the German is without skill, I should be shown the largest machine shop in the city, owned and operated by a German. If I said the German is lazy, I should be shown the largest and finest residence on the most fashionable avenue, built from the savings of a German who began life in poverty. If I said that the German could not be trusted, I should be introduced to a man of that race who is the president of the largest bank in the city. If I said that the German is not fitted for citizenship, I should be shown a German who is a respected and influential member of the city government. Now, when your critics say that the Negro is lazy, I want you to be able to show them the finest farm in the community, owned and operated by a Negro. When they ask if the Negro is honest, I want you to show them a Negro whose note is acceptable at the bank for $5,000. When they say that the Negro is not economical, I want you to show them a Negro with $50,000 in the bank. When they say that the Negro is not fit for citizenship, I want you to show them a man of our race paying taxes on a cotton factory. I want you to be able to show them Negroes who stand in the front in the affairs of state, of religion, of education, of mechanics, of commerce, and of household economy. You remember the old admonition, "By this sign we shall conquer." Let it be our motto. There are people in the North who have been aiding in the matter of Negro education in the South during the last 10, 20, or even 30 years. It is in part the money of those people that has made this institution possible. Those people have a right, as a plain matter of business, to ask, what are the results of this aid they have been giving? What evidences can we present to prove to them that their investments in this direction have been paying ones? It is, in no small measure, the duty of you, as students of Tuskegee Institute, to answer, and to answer satisfactorily, such a question as that. We have reached a point, largely through the aid which the North has given to the South during the last 30 years, where there is little opposition in the South to the people of the Negro race receiving any form of education. You can go out from here and plant a school in any county in the South, which will not meet with opposition from the white residents of the community. What is more, in many cases it will receive encouragement, and in some a hearty sympathy and support. Not long ago I received $50 from a white man in Mississippi to pay for the education of a black boy. This man was formerly a slaveholder, and at first he was not inclined to encourage the education of the Negro, but he stated to me frankly, in his letter, that he now believes that Tuskegee and similar institutions are doing the work that the Negro most needs to have done. He wanted to show the people of the North, he said, that Southern white men are as deeply interested in the development of the Negro as they are. I have in mind another case, of a Southern white man in Alabama, who during the last year contributed out of his own pocket nearly $2,000 for the building and maintenance of a Negro school in his county. Still another Southern man, Mr. Belton Gilreath of Birmingham, Alabama, recently sent the Institute his check for $500, up to that time the largest sum which the school had received from a Southern man, with this letter: "As a Southern man and the son of one of the largest slave owners of the South, I am anxious for our people to do all that can reasonably be expected of them for the education of the Negroes, thereby making them more content and useful citizens and friends. Furthermore, I think the time has come in the South for all our people to consider more fully than they have ever done before the question of the education of all of our population, and, wherever practicable, to give attention in our schools to teaching the art of saving also." More recently still, Mr. H. M. Atkinson of Atlanta, one of the most successful businessmen in the entire South, came to Tuskegee Institute and made a thorough inspection of our work. After he returned to Atlanta, I received a letter from him, from which I quote one paragraph: "I enclose my check for $1,000 for the benefit of your school, to be used as your judgment dictates. I was very much impressed by what I saw. I will not forget it." These white people are beginning to see the difference between the value of an educated Negro and one who is not educated. It is for you to demonstrate to them this value more and more clearly every year. End of chapter 30. Object Lessons. Recording by Luke Sartor, Griffith, New South Wales.